Who will it be? The Big 12 or the ACC that comes calling first? You're locked on.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Before we dive into today's show, just wanted to take a moment to say how thankful we are for all of you. This podcast has grown so much, and we're not just talking hyperbole. As of today with the podcast and currently over the last, say, 3 weeks or so, we are the number one college basketball show on the Locked On Podcast Network. And it's because of fans like you who value great content. We're proud to say we're the only daily podcast covering both the UConn men's and women's basketball, the hoops capital of the world. And we're thrilled to bring you the coverage you deserve. And to show that gratitude, we're giving back. We're donating 10% of our revenue to Husky Ticket Project, helping send kids to UConn games and making donations to NIL that we feel make a huge difference. If you're enjoying the show, take a moment to subscribe, follow, leave a review wherever you listen. Thank you for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can still get a big return on FanDuel. The playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in the regular season action with FanDuel because right now new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets. If your first $5 bet wins, visit FanDuel.com to check it out. Well, today we welcome to the program Pete Mundo. He's a seasoned broadcaster whose career has spanned sports and news media at both the local and national level. A Villanova graduate, we won't hold it against him. Pete got his start hosting sports talk show and broadcasting Wildcats football, basketball, and baseball. Pete is also hosted on WFAN, CBS Sports Radio, and nationally syndicated Fox News Talk. He's also handling play-by-play for Wagner College and football and basketball in the past. He's also the creator of Heartland HCS, your home for everything Big 12 football, basketball, baseball, and softball. We welcome to the program Pete right now. All right, so we bring Pete Mundo into the program. Pete, I'll start off with a question. The Big 12 ACC, fierce competition, kind of an arms race between the two conferences. What's your take on the current state of college athletics in that regard? Do you think, you mentioned in How I Found You that you probably feel like ACC is more on brand for UConn, but why do you think the Big 12 keeps kind of getting in the middle there? Like who's gonna pull the trigger first?
Well, the Big 12 has its commissioner, Brett Yormark, who is a New York City guy, worked for Rock Nation, worked for the Brooklyn Nets. He's got deep New York City ties. He wants to be in that media market. And we all understand, what UConn is to the New York City media market. I cover the Big 12 for a living. I'm in Kansas City. I've been doing this for 10 years with Heartland College Sports, but I'm actually a Villanova alum. So I know the Big East really well. I just have been in Big 12 country forever and launched this business around the Big 12. But, my knowledge on UConn, which might not endear me to your audience, is from the perspective of being a Villanova guy. So yep. I know what Madison Square Garden means to UConn, to the Big East tournament. And if you weave that into the Big 12, I get the geography surrounding the ACC and why that would appeal itself to UConn. But I do think that, and I understand why the average UConn fan is like, well, obviously I take the ACC over the Big 12. Like, I understand that. But I do think the Big 12 brings something very unique to the table that UConn can benefit from, and that is stability, that is innovation from the top down, led by Brett Yormark, the commissioner of this conference. And that's something that the ACC, I don't think, has solid footing on right now. You've got a better TV contract in the Big 12. You've got a longer deal, or a shorter deal, actually, but a better deal, a deal that comes up here in a few years. The ACC is locked into that whole mess until the mid-2030s. That's what that legal battle is over with Florida State, Clemson, and some of the others. So if you're looking for unity, you're looking for great basketball, and you're looking to kind of be that brand in the Northeast that can tie West Virginia, Cincinnati, some of these schools to the heartland, UConn's the perfect fit, and it really can be a marriage that works well for both sides.
No, I agree with you there, because I think the point of contention, and when we go to the next break, I'll play the recording that I essentially was introduced to you, and I started to look into little bit of your background. I did say in the intro that you're a Villanova grad, and I said don't hold it against him. So hopefully the audience does not. But I think that you're right. I think the Big 12 provides a sense of, this is not, people are comparing it to the American Conference, and I think it's literally the laziest comparison that they could come up with, because of all the things you just mentioned, between the TV deal. The ACC has just always been that golden goose that Big East fans have thought they could be a part of since Boston College left. But Boston College is also one of the reasons why UConn's not in the ACC. So I'm not sure if UConn wants to share a conference with someone like BC just because of things like that. That's always been a point of contention. Can you speak on that?
Well, I think UConn would be propping up Boston College by joining that.
That's for sure.
I mean, Boston College, I wouldn't want them in the Big 12. But I mean, it does nothing for the Boston media market. It's just like Rutgers to the Big 10. This whole idea that Rutgers brought New York City to the Big 10. No, it didn't. UConn would do much more for that, for any conference that it joins, than Rutgers has ever done, or that Boston would do, or BC would do for Boston College, or BC would do for Boston. So that is, I agree with you there, Mark. I think that, they would be doing a favor for the ACC by joining them on that front.
Absolutely. And when we return, I really want to dive into, I'm going to play the video of how we found Pete, thanks to a really cool account that is a UConn account, Colonel Calhoun. And then we're going to talk about, from the Big 12 perspective, UConn's value, what they could potentially bring to the table. And I want to hear Pete's take on that coming up after the break. The NFL season and the playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. FanDuel has so many ways to win. I personally love anytime touchdowns or over-unders, but you can do regular spreads, alternative spreads. There's a ton of things for you to do. So just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, we're back with Pete Mundo of Heartland. It's Heartland CS, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, the Twitter, it's too long for X these days, or it was too long for Twitter as well. So it's on X at Heartland_CS for Heartland College Sports. But you can find us Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. We're in all those different places. I've owned that operation for 10 years since my first radio job in Oklahoma. So it's been a winding road, but we built a pretty good audience in Big 12 country.
Awesome, man. Well, listen, this is the video that we found of you and why we asked you to jump on the program. We're going to play it. It's less than a minute, but we're going to add this to the stage real quick.
Number 3, both the Big 12 and the ACC can make that case. And if you bring UConn to the Big 12, you keep them out of the ACC. And the ACC, if they can figure out all their legal troubles and infighting, adding UConn would, I believe, make them a potentially more appealing conference than the Big 12 from a basketball perspective. They would have Syracuse, and I know Syracuse has been down, but I'm just talking from a brand old Big East perspective. Syracuse, Notre Dame, UConn, Boston College, all former Big East teams, right? With great alumni bases in the New York City market. Duke, North Carolina, Louisville. Those could rival the Big 12 from a...
Now I'm going to cut it off there for purposes of, we get the gist of it. And I totally agree. I think from a perspective of brand of what it's been, but I also feel like we're going into a new era, and it's not necessarily about whether it's on brand or not. I mean, Cal is in the ACC, so it doesn't matter anymore. What's UConn's value if you take away the old Big East and all of that, harkening back to nostalgia? The reason why the Karate Kid is still a thing is because of nostalgia, right? But I want to get into the new era, right? Big 12 expansion. How does UConn help Big 12 expansion in your opinion?
Well, from the Big 12 perspective, like I noted, it really keeps them out of the ACC. And when you have a zero-sum game that is conference realignment, if you keep a team out of another conference and you think there's benefit to them from your perspective, well, it helps you. It's hurting them, right? So if UConn, just from a perception perspective as well, if UConn joins the ACC, well, that's going to be a huge boost to the ACC, because all the conversation around the ACC has been about how the conference is floundering. No one's on the same page. The big dogs want out. And let's be honest, too, if you're a UConn fan and Florida State and maybe Clemson and maybe Miami and maybe North Carolina won out, and North Carolina, if there's a team that the SEC would ever expand with, it's believed to be North Carolina. Paul Feinbaum has said that. He said that on my show on YouTube. He was on a couple of months ago, and he said, listen, I don't think the SEC is going to do anything, but if they did do something, they would love North Carolina. So then what are you left with? I mean, then you're really left with the American Conference. And I know that's what UConn fans want to avoid. And I understand you have just an awful, awful memory of that.
Mm-hmm.
So then you say, okay, we're a basketball school first. Well, my gosh, I mean, you look at the brands this conference has right now, and you look at Arizona, Baylor, you go to Houston, Iowa State, KU, K-State, Oklahoma State's on the rebound, Texas Tech. I mean, these are West Virginia, obviously. These are great brands. And you would just have what feels like NCAA tournament games night in, night out. And that's what they really have this season. John Rothstein said that the other night on CBS, which has been a great deal for the Big 12. I think the Big 12 games on CBS Sports Network, they're going to do these doubleheaders, is going to be a big hit for the Big 12 and is going to really prove to be highly successful this season for them.
Yeah, no, I've always agreed with that, and I think the hesitation is on travel. You said you're in Kansas City, like where you lose Madison Square Garden as a Big East championship. People love that. Trust me, when I was a kid, that's all I did is you get on a bus with about 50 family members and friends, and you drive to the city and go to these games, right? And so I think people would miss that. But what I would say, and I want to get your take on this, if they did join the Big 12 next year, the year after, whenever it comes to fruition, if it does. Couldn't there be, and I know Brett Yormark is very innovative and could think of this from his perspective, wouldn't there be a great preseason tournament at Madison Square Garden with Big 12 type teams, or maybe you just play big time neutral site games like you always play Kansas at Madison Square Garden, and then we return the favor and play them in the United Center or something like that the next year. So there's opportunity to not lose some of those big time venue sites just because you're leveling up to a larger conference.
I think that if they got UConn, they would get a Big 12 tournament in Madison Square Garden. I think that would be something that Brett Yormark would make happen. Now, they've got they just signed a new deal with Kansas City, and it's a 6 to 7 year deal. And I'll tell you what, listen, I've been to many Big East tournaments. As a Villanova guy, I have been to a ton of Big 12 tournaments, being here in Kansas City now for going on 7 years. And I'm not saying anything tops the Garden, especially when you're right there. But let's be honest, and I say this as a Villanova guy, if it's not Villanova and it's not UConn and it's not St. John's and it's Creighton and Marquette, the Garden doesn't feel like it did 15 years ago. Let's be honest. It doesn't feel like it did with Syracuse and Notre Dame. And, I graduated in 2010, so that was kind of that heyday of that 18-team league. You could go back. Plenty of fans will go back, obviously, 30 plus years on this. But, I watch the Big East tournament. But if you get some of these schools that are really good basketball teams and programs, but they're not in that few hour drive from the Garden, it's not the same. And I'm telling you, Kansas City, it's going to sound ridiculous to someone who hasn't been here. But until you've experienced it, it is really great. I'm not going to say it's the Garden in the heyday of the Big East. It's not. But this city does lock down. The city embraces this thing in a way that New York can't, just based on the sheer size of it. When you're here, it's Big 12 tournament week. The city is packed with Big 12 fans from every school, and it is a good time. But to circle it back, I do think if Yormark could get UConn in, there would be a lot of events in the Garden, in that New York City media market, and he would make sure of that because he does want to have a footprint there. Last year during the Big 12 tournament, they bought billboards in Midtown Manhattan promoting the Big 12 tournament. So there would be some kind of deal there to make sure events are happening in that town.
Fair enough. Well, when we come back, our last segment, kind of teased it already a little bit about who's going to pull the trigger. And I want to get Pete's thoughts on if he thinks it's actually going to happen, or if this is just going to be another year of us talking about it. So we'll do that coming up after the break. The holidays are a perfect time to create lasting memories with people you care about. For me, there's nothing better than sharing the joy of live events this season. I'll never forget taking my family to a basketball game last December down here at North Carolina. And it wasn't just about the game. It was about being together and just having a fun time, making memories. We talk about that to this day. Game Time is all about togetherness. This holiday season, there are new Game Time picks feature makes it easier than ever to find incredible deals on the best seats. It filters out the fluff, so you're not only seeing top-tier seats at unbeatable prices, but you're also doing it in an easy, slick app. Whether it's a concert, comedy show, or a big game, Game Time Picks has you covered. I checked out a few games for friends because a lot of times if I don't take my family, I get to go to games for free because I'm a member of the media. So I get a lot of family and friends the lowest price guarantee because that's what Game Time offers. They take the guesswork out of ticket buying, no more scalping tickets. They have you covered even with event cancellation protection if you're doing a concert, job loss assurance, so you can buy with confidence. Ready to make this holiday season unforgettable? Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. That's right, $20 off. Terms may apply. Again, download the Game Time app today, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege to save. What time is it, y'all? It's game time. All right, we're back on Locked On UConn with your host here, Mark Zanetto. We bring in Pete Mundo, again, helping us out from Heartland CS. Been running that for 10 years. Obviously, you've been on WFAN, other places, nationally syndicated radio. So we really appreciate you sharing your perspective with us over there in Kansas City, Big 12 country. All right. I got killed on a story earlier this year when the Big 12 stuff was happening. I was first to break the news literally across the entire country. I don't know if you knew that, but I broke the news about UConn they were in talks with the Big 12. Then 3 days later, the New York Times, a couple other venues, Yahoo Sports with Ross Dellinger, we had him on after, came out with the story. I had a person working with some of the writers that felt like this was imminent. So I doubled down and I was wrong. So obviously I had to walk that back. Do you think this will ever happen with UConn to the Big 12?
Well, I do, as long as Brett Yormark stays as the commissioner, because it's kind of his golden goose. There are two parts to this. One is the New York City media market that we spent a lot of time on. He is a basketball guy through and through. And the part that maybe some UConn fans don't know is that Brett Yormark signed a short-term contract when he became commissioner with ESPN and Fox, because his vision is that he believes basketball is undervalued. Right now, these TV contracts are all football, and basically basketball is bonused into them. He sees a world where he can decouple football from basketball, and he can sign a football deal, and I'm just making this part up, with ESPN and Fox, but he could sign a basketball contract with TNT. So he wants to build that basketball brand to basically have two products instead of theoretically one, where basketball is bonused into the contract. So as long as he's commissioner, I do think this can happen. And I did see your report. I remember that. It went viral. And I know you said that you were wrong on the back end. And I guess technically you were wrong, but you were wrong, but it wasn't because your sourcing was wrong. You were wrong because I believe more of what happened on the Big 12 side, and that's really not your lane. What happened on the Big 12 side is that basically the ADs and the presidents are not sold on UConn yet, and they're worried about the football side. And
what's that going to take? Do you think this year, I don't mean to cut you off, do you think this year's 9-win season is the catalyst to potentially having those talks again?
I mean, it is to me. It should be. I mean, if I'm a Big 12 president and I'm in an arms race with the ACC and I see Coach Mora, doing a solid job and competitive in every ACC game they played, and then beating, except for Maryland, and then beating UNC to end the season, you get to 9 wins. Listen, UConn football doesn't need to win Big 12 championships. Frankly, it's not good for the conference if it does. Let's be honest.
Right.
It's like if UConn's the team that's going, 3-6 and is bowl eligible with 3 non-conference games that are winnable, that's fine. I mean, that's probably best case scenario for everybody. It's for the basketball. Now, you can't have the football be what KU was for 10 years under Charlie Weiss and all those guys.
Absolutely.
Until Lance Leipold turned it around. You can't have like the worst team imaginable in Power 5 or Power 4. But if you've got a competitive product on the football field with the basketball brand, that should be appealing enough to Big 12 ADs and presidents. And I know like heck from my sources in the Big 12 up the conference ladder that they really want this UConn thing to happen. There just still is some convincing at the AD and president's level around the Big 12 that needs to really make it happen.
Well, we'll have to make sure that we keep tabs of you, and when all of this stuff starts to drop again, we can definitely have you on the program for a potential celebration if that does happen. But I will ask you one last question before we get out of here. If a 180 happens and the ACC comes around and says, "All right, we actually understand. We see Pete's point that UConn is very valuable, and we want to beat the Big 12 to the punch." Do you think, because I do, that this could turn more into, like you said, an American conference if they went to the ACC with all their destabilization and, North Carolina maybe defecting, others, because there could be a situation, you mentioned this and I didn't bring it up last time, if the SEC went after North Carolina, it's a Carolina State system. It's kind of like a package deal. Like from what my understanding down here, because actually I'm not local to Connecticut, I live in North Carolina. And from my understanding is if North Carolina goes somewhere, they're taking NC State with them. So I don't think the SEC wants that. So that's the thing is like if things get crazy, wouldn't it make more sense for the Big 12? But what if the ACC steps in? What do you think the Big 12 would do? Do you think they would try to counter an offer?
Well, I think they definitely expedite the process, but that's where I think that things are pretty stable and steady for now. But the Big 12 does want to get ahead of this thing because they don't want to end up in basically, pick us or pick them kind of a deal. They just want to get the thing done, or at least I know the conference head honchos want to get the thing done because they don't want to end up in that kind of a situation. Because let's be honest, it's what you noted. While nobody knows what's going to happen in realignment, the appeal and the pressure from a lot of people, I would imagine, on the UConn end, fan base and elsewhere, will say, "You mean we're going to turn down Duke for Baylor?" I mean, it's nothing against Waco, Texas, but listen, I mean, you're going to do that. And yes, Kansas is wildly appealing, and Allen Fieldhouse and everything else that comes with that. But, it's a lot easier trip, obviously, going to Pittsburgh and going to Duke and North Carolina and, BC and some of those places. So I'm bringing back Syracuse and stuff like that. So that's where the Big 12, I don't think, wants to be. They don't want to be in a situation where it's us or them and both options are on the table, because I do think some of that, what we were talking about earlier, thinking about the old days and longing for the old days, could end up moving the needle towards the ACC, and I don't think the Big 12 wants to take that risk.
No, I agree with you, but I will say before we go, I think the fact that we do have a progressive and forward-thinking Dave Benedict, who I don't think wants to go backwards and is all in on the Big 12 aspect. He hasn't said so to me, but we've had him on the program twice, and he says the politically correct thing, and it's his right to do so. That they're going to look at all options to further their athletic department. So, but man, we really appreciate you having you on. I know you mentioned it already, but tell us again where you can find your stuff before we get out of here.
Yeah, well, since we're on YouTube in the podcast, just search Heartland College Sports on YouTube or on Apple or Spotify. You can find us there, subscribe to the channel. And we're always on the website, heartlandcollegesports.com. All the Big 12 content, the forums are there. And obviously every social media platform, X, Instagram, Facebook. So I appreciate you having me, Mark. Yeah, let's definitely keep in touch, because I think we could have some interesting conversations. I don't know how soon, but they could be on the horizon. Who knows?
I made a prediction for basically it was December, this time next year, December. So end of 2025, but we'll see how right I am. We'll see.
I hope,
all right, guys.
I hope, man. I hope from your lips.
Yeah. Listen, just so you guys know, before we go, start to follow at Pete Mundo, because you may need to find some Big 12 stuff. You need to get some scouting reports for if UConn's playing a Big 12 schedule in a couple of years. So that's it for today. That's another episode of Locked On UConn. We really appreciate you tuning in. Ask you to stay locked on, stay connected, make sure those toughness meters are always rising. And as always, go Huskies.
Go Huskies.